Jonathan, you're very welcome for another episode of Kickoff Sessions. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I've been following your stuff on LinkedIn. Found it very helpful for a young guy like myself, 2-3 years experience for trying to figure out my just way in life, way in career. And I think a lot of your career advice and just insights into life in general have been helpful for myself. So I think today will be super helpful for everyone else.
Appreciate it, Darren. Happy to be here.
So before we get going, do you want to just get a short background into yourself and especially around your career coaching and really your kind of interest in career development right up until this point?
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a weirdo in the world of career coaching. I'm an older dude. Not sure if people can see me. I'm 40. I just turned 42 last week. Wow.
Ooh.
Thought I could say that. Yeah. But my focus is on young professional development. So I primarily focus on folks 18 to 26. And help them answer the question, what should I do with my life? Which almost every single 18 to 26-year-old asks themselves probably every day. So I act as a guide. I call myself the career whisperer. It's actually, I did it as a joke. Yeah, it's kind of funny. And then it just stuck. And now I think more people, it's kind of cool with branding, right? I think more people know me as the career whisperer than Jonathan Tesser, which is what shows up on my LinkedIn. So I'm the career whisperer for young professionals. What does that mean? It means that through my coaching and through what I call guided self-awareness, I help young professionals figure out what's the next step in their career. I give them the clarity to do that through a probe into themselves, which is something that is shockingly lacking in universities. They don't do that kind of deep work that every student really needs to do. They're like, okay, I'll help you with your resume and, go on, LinkedIn and network and all this stuff, practical. And to me, finding meaning in a career is much more of a spiritual journey than that. As cheesy as that sounds, I believe that that's the case. So you have to take a journey inside of yourself if you really want to figure out what career happiness looks like for you. So I help clients do that, and primarily in the young professional range.
That's awesome. It's almost like you emphasize more on the psychology aspect of it and really looking at more like their actual like mentality and their approach towards careers versus their hard skills. Now, obviously, there may be an element of this, of course, but even from the way you like kind of express yourself and the way you kind of get it across, it's more focused on what a belief system and really trying to identify that and go through like an evolutionary process, which is so difficult because exactly what you're discussing there is my career. For up until this point, I really wanted to follow something that seemed like the equivalent of the American dream, but Ireland. I kind of wanted, a certain type of job, and I realized I didn't particularly like this area. Had to make a bit of a transition, and it's essentially like reevaluating your life. I made a transition, and I'm currently in a new company that I absolutely love. But I think there's too much emphasis, as you said, in career, in university, on get the degree, get the skills, and just jump into a different role.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Darren. Most of my clients fit your prototype, right? So they're not necessarily right out of college, and the reason for that is the people right out of college are just so blinded by getting the best job at the best company, with the skills that they have, right? So they're so blinded with that they don't realize that there's such a thing as career dissatisfaction, right? So most of the clients who come to me are like 24, 25, 2 to 3 years out, and they're like, oh, I was sold a false bill of goods here. I gotta really figure out who I am, and I gotta figure out the next direction after this 2 to 3 years, because this is just so unsatisfying. And that's the real word, right? It's unsatisfying. I'm unsatisfied with that approach because I had the blinders on about what I was supposed to do, and now the rose-colored glasses are off. And I see what life is like, and I'm like, I need John, I need your help. I'm so confused, right? That's how people come to me, and they're like, I'm in this job and I just don't like it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I call it I'm like, oh, you're a John Tesser special. I'm like, we'll set you in the right direction.
Exactly. Like you're a data guy. So like essentially doing a root cause analysis on this. If you go back to the root, as in, there's a lot of things that stem from similar issues. So take me as a perfect example. I had that exact area. I was dissatisfied. I was sold to something. Well, I wasn't sold. I bought into something that I thought would be different. Correction.
Oh, you were
But
sold. You were sold by society. You were sold by your parents. You were sold by university.
Mhm.
You were sold. It's not on you as much as you think it is. You know, you think you have agency over this, but there's so many external pressures kind of layering on top of you that you're not even aware of.
And
Just wanted to bring that part up.
does external
Yeah.
influence have a effect on the cause, the root of all of this, do you think? Like, what are the factors that
Uh,
lead to this?
That is an amazing question. So essentially what I'm doing for clients is having them unlearn that they need these external pressures to make them happy in their careers, right? So a lot of young folks are really, you know, influenced by parents and peers and you know what society is telling them and what they're seeing with all of the success stories on LinkedIn, right? And they're not doing the work on themselves to be like, okay, let's ignore all of that noise. Let's take it out of the equation and look inside ourselves and see what kind of a person we are. And then bring as much of that person into my career to do the things that I want to do.
And is that more kind of evolutionary? So, like, what's your advice for people like that that are essentially making those judgments? You know, there's making decisions and then there's making better decisions as time goes on, and you're going to fail and screw up and, you know, essentially improve. But how do you like essentially guide and educate someone like that who is through a transition period? Like, what would you advise?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not even advice. It's just leading you into yourself, right? So let's talk a little bit about the program that I have, so it makes more sense. It's not like I'm trying to advertise it here, but I
It
think
makes more
it will
sense.
help for people to understand a little bit tangibly more about what I do, since it is a process. So what I ask clients to do is gather adjectives from other people in their lives to describe who they are. It's not helpful, Darren, for you to describe who you are to me, because you're going to say some, no offense, some boring things that mean nothing. Maybe like, I'm a funny guy and I'm sociable. And those are words that will not come up from people who know you. They're going to use words like studious and analytical and, you know, all of these adjectives where you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. I didn't know that that was about me. And then I ask questions why a certain person used those adjectives. And we go into this, you know, I guess you would call it in the world of business, 360-degree review, right? Of you based on how other people perceive you. And then I asked, is that correct? Do you believe that? Why would that person say that? And then usually the person says to me, well, it's come up a lot, so I guess it's true, right? And so even the exercise of gathering that information about your personality opens up a lot of eyes about who you are, right? We move into things that you do for fun. Literally just put a post out this morning. How boring are you if all you do is work? That was my post this morning. And so the second part of the of the sessions with me is stuff you do for fun. And then, you know, people are like looking at me confused, like, well, what is it? Who cares what I do for fun? That has nothing to do with work. And my response is, well, it actually has everything to do with it. The more you do stuff for fun, the more you choose to do something with your voluntary time, the more important that is to you as a person. It's actually like based on your values, right? So if you're into sports, right, and you're a soccer player, for instance, what is it about being a soccer player that you enjoy? Is it hanging out with your friends and grabbing a beer afterward? You don't really care how you perform, or are you obsessed with getting better? And, you know, are you the team captain and you really enjoy that role of motivator, right? Each of these clues as to why you do what you do for fun really helps you understand yourself and bring some of those characteristics into a job, right? Then we still don't get into work experience. We talk about we talk about early academics and things you enjoyed learning and things you didn't enjoy learning in school pre-college. And it's important that it's pre-college, right? A lot of people have to choose their major as they go into college, or, you know, their parents pressure them into doing something. So it's like, okay, well, that's not terribly helpful. But when you talk about things that you enjoy learning and thinking about before college, whether that's on your own or in school, that also gives a lot of clues as to where you should go, right? So for instance, if you like, I love this one, right? I get a lot of engineers and analytics people coming to me. So I like I like to decipher between them. Some of them say they like physics. And I say, why? And they come back to me and they're like, I like the fact that I can explain, phenomenon that I see. That's actually a very telling thing, right? Whereas other people say, I hate physics, but I love algebra. And I love solving for X, and I love that it's so simple and elegant to solve for X, right? So these are the clues that come up in a lot of the conversations I have about academics and the differences between certain things that you enjoy learning about. And then, believe me or not, despite the fact that we haven't talked about your uni, right? And despite the fact that we haven't talked about your work experience, 80% of the time, I already know what you should do for your career based on that 1 hour session, right? I have enough of a mind bank to be like, you're going to go in this direction. And that's what the second session is. And we talk about that, as well as some of your work experience in your university life, which is, believe it or not, mostly unimportant in helping me figure out where you should go.
That's so telling, because it shows so much about early stage developments of people, their mind, their skills, their characteristics. And I'm just thinking of myself as a perfect example there. So like my spare time is spent podcasting. I have a background in bodybuilding and competitive sports. And that is actually a big indicator of kind of the way I am at work, in a competitive field. It's kind of just inherent, like as in if myself and my girlfriend go to do an activity, like I'm very competitive in it. So that tells a lot.
Yeah.
And same about pre-university, very similar in Ireland. A lot of people are doing degrees that are influenced by others. However, I gravitated towards business and economics. It's just what I thought was so interesting. There was, we were told, I always remember this in school early days, my business teacher said, he was like, how do you ever plan to be successful in the world of business if you don't know what's going on? What he meant by this in terms of you should be reading the newspaper every day, you should be up to date if this is what you're interested in. And I got into a habit of checking things like this. It was either the news, it was the FT at the time, or whatever. So I saw those kind of tendencies. And then when you get to university, things get skewed though, So there's two sides to it. There's the benefit of, we'll talk about the exploration and experimenting element of university, and there was a lot of that. But then things get skewed because I went into doing business information systems, which is like computer science with business. I hadn't a clue about programming, and I had no interest in it. At the end of the day, I did it because my friends did it, and I was easily influenced down that path. Now I had loads of like self-exploration elements of university, which was traveling, meeting people out of my comfort zone, starting side businesses, which all failed, by the way. Every single one of them went to the floor, lost a load of money, but they all were part of the improvement process,
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Even as you're talking, the coach in me would be asking you to delve in more, right? And that's what my role is, right? So I have the process, but I'm not just sitting there, right? I'm actively guiding you towards deeper levels. It's like peeling off an onion, right? What you said was interesting on a surface perspective, but if we were to go deeper into what it is, the value that you got out of reading the Financial Times, exactly, right? We're going to keep peeling those onions till we get to the core of that. And then we're going to get those insights. And then that's, like you said, that's the analytical mind in me, is always looking for those insights and those whys to explain phenomenon.
And that leads to like poor decision making overall, when people make these irrational decisions because they were guided by the wrong things, so they didn't really follow what interests them. And it happens a lot when people start something they enjoy but give it up because of the external pressures. So how do you think like poor decision making can be improved?
There's no such thing as poor. There's no such thing as poor decision making. There's just decision making that's made using the wrong content, like using the wrong inputs, right? If we're going to talk analytics, I don't believe in using negative terminology for things. That's actually a rule in my sessions, which is like, I don't allow you to beat yourself up, and there's no self-judgment. There just is. It's a big rule, right? You can't say, well, I'm overbearing or I overthink. And I usually ask clients to reframe that and say, no, you don't overthink. You just think about certain topics a lot and they interest you. That's the interesting thing, right? It's not that you overthink. And it's important because a lot of what I'm doing is building up the confidence in people. If it comes down to it, it's a little bit, like psychotherapy. But I'm building you up to have the confidence that who you are is good enough, right? And that's why we go through that process. Because a lot of people come to me and they're like, I'm just broken, right? And you know, I hate to say it, it is a little gendered. Like women are much more open to saying things like that. I'm like, no, you're
100%.
not. You're not broken. You just, you know, you are who you are, and you may be pursuing the wrong thing. So to answer your question about decision making, I think what I'm saying is what I do gives you the tools to make better decisions based on the things that matter as opposed to the things that don't.
That makes a lot of sense. I think as well is people are kind of cornered into certain areas, which, you know, we've mentioned. But what's interesting, especially you said there from kind of like a kind of neuroscience perspective, is people are often doing a single thing. So they go in and do finance, let's say, as a perfect example, end up in a hedge fund or KPMG or something like this first, and they don't see other opportunities.
That's right.
And I think that's very close to myself as well. But if you're familiar with Dr. Andrew Hubbard, the neuroscientist, he has his own podcast. He speaks a lot about like neuroplasticity in essentially young professionals or young people. And his approach, his advice is to develop the broadest again set of skills, look a lot in different disciplines, whether it's the cello, whether it is doing different sports, and to early on get a broad sense of different things, and you'll stick to some and you'll hate others. Now for
That's
people
right.
that are quite young and are still trying to find their feet, would you agree with this, and what would you kind of recommend to keep essentially your options open in a very simplistic way to look at it?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down, I agree with that. And it comes down to flow moments. And we haven't talked about that. So a flow moment, for those who aren't familiar, is you probably all heard the term in the flow when you're, you know, you're doing, if you're doing professional bodybuilding, is that what you said, right? There must be moments where you don't even realize what's going on with time. You're just so concentrated and keyed into what you're doing. And what you're looking for when you're trying out these broad activities and you're doing a bunch of different things, which again, I do agree with is a great way to explore and try things, is you're looking for those flow moments when time sort of stops and you're so caught up in what you're doing because you're engrossed in it. It's just you and the activity are one, right? If we're going to get a little metaphysical here, you're looking for those moments and you're looking to think back to those moments when you're really caught in flow, right? And so that also is very telling, because if that is something that you and the activity are caught in one, that means that you're going to do it. And to your point, you're going to be motivated to continue, because that's one of the most peak experiences that we can have as humans, is to be in a flow moment. So I would encourage to really think about the enjoyment that you had doing something and what you were doing when you were doing it.
On motivation as well, you know, people come and go with different interests, like even podcasting. There's some days where I just don't feel it. Some days I do. There's some days that are quite difficult. And especially with a career, which is often quite matching as well in terms of that kind of relationship. How do you kind of, I think about things like motivation, which is often quite
Yeah.
non-linear, and maintaining that in terms of your interest or what you're trying to pursue, because, you know, personalities and interests often evolve, which I found, you know, what I used to be really interested in a couple of years ago has now kind of fizzled out, and now there's other things. But in
Yeah.
terms of a career, which is a long-term play, what's your approach towards that kind of like area?
Yeah, I mean, I get frustrated with young people. And I'll give you a personal story here, right? So I post twice a day, every day on LinkedIn. That's a lot. I post probably, I'm one of the more prolific people on, and it's all original content. And I just asked my audience if they want me to start repeating things like that I've written, because I've written, I don't know, over 1,000 posts at this point. And and I'm like, I don't want to repeat. I'm so stubborn. I'm like, I'm just going to keep coming, but I'm starting to run out of ideas, to be really honest. The reason I bring this up is I spent a lot of 2020 when I was building up my audience, right? So one of the things that, you know, it's worth letting your listeners know is I built my audience on LinkedIn from around 15,000 beginning January 2020 to I'm at 138,000 now. So it's really, really big. And all through this, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about and sort of preaching this message of bring yourself to work and to career. And a lot of 2020 I've spent, you know, working with young content creators on LinkedIn. who I saw had a lot of potential to be really, really good, better than me, right? My whole thing is I love to mentor people. I love to watch them succeed, especially young professionals. I do it at my job, and I wanted to do it through LinkedIn content, right? And I was mentoring, I don't know, 4 or 5 people where I saw a lot of potential. Literally 0 of them are still posting on LinkedIn. And it's frustrating because, they're not sticking to it. They're brilliant at it. They try it for a little while and then they give up. But what's really interesting is all of those people are still active on Instagram, right? So that says something about who they are and what is their motivation, right? So they're looking for something from Instagram, whether it's like, external validation, about their physical characteristics or something like that, or just like, they prefer to personally express themselves, their friends and their stories, whatever it is, right? There's something about Instagram that's leading to continued use there, and sort of like LinkedIn is just for work and I don't do it and I'm done. And there's nothing you can say. Like, and I see it all the time. So I stopped mentoring young people on LinkedIn because I just don't see any of them, literally 0 of the thousands of young people that I've talked to who want to do it more than 1 or 2 times, right?
And there's so much in that as well.
Yeah,
so much
it's because they don't have that motivation to continue. And whatever that is, I don't know. But young people, like, to your point, yes, it's great to try things, but you're going to suck when you first try it. So you have to keep going until you get better, until you get better, until you get better. I've written posts about this too. And like my first content on LinkedIn was crap. It was like full sentences, full paragraphs. You couldn't read the thing. It was like a work email, right? So now I have an actual style, and like, I don't know, I feel like half of LinkedIn is copying what I do now because of the style. They see that it's effective, and I'm like, okay, fine. But that didn't come so easily, right? That takes time to be able to establish that and turn it into something where you're a master. And so, this ties in with the flow moments that we were talking about. If you experience flow moments and you experience intense joy and satisfaction in accomplishing something, you're going to be more likely to continue doing it. But you're going to be frustrated no matter what when you start, right? So young people really have to commit to doing things. And I think it's a big, as much as I love young people and I love working with them, I love interacting with them, this is a downfall for the Gen Z generation for sure. They just don't stick to things, right? They try it and they're like, I'm done. I'm like, no, I'm not cool with that because it takes you a while to get here. It's a lot of work.
And I 100% can vouch for every single thing you said, because of the fact that everyone is looking for that instant gratification, which is the like on Instagram. So LinkedIn is a slow burner. I love LinkedIn. I'm trying to post every single day now, and the engagement goes up, it goes down. It's a slow burner, and I'm getting good feedback overall, which lets me know that somehow things are working some way. However, I always say that LinkedIn or Instagram is for ass and abs. That's literally what I've broken it down to, okay? And under the ass and abs...
You said it. I used the term physical characteristics. Right? I don't want to get in trouble with my audience.
Under this concept, what this means is that because you just look at it and you flick through, you literally look and you flick, it's so easy to get that like and to get that essentially piece of dopamine injected into you,
That's right.
And I actually podcasted with a really, really big YouTuber, like Instagram guy recently, Rob Lipsett, great guy, really nice, super like charismatic and everything. And we're discussing just podcasting. And I was like, it's a different ball game in terms of like the download that you get. Like one download is the equivalent of like 1,000 likes, as in you need to be committed to it and you need to like love it, because you're not going to get that instant pull, but you need different indicators. But this all goes back to, so removing these elements, it all goes back to having essentially someone pat you on the back continuously in a younger generation, because TikTok.
Well, that's what YouTube, you think it is. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think the reason I've been able to continue going on LinkedIn is I use LinkedIn as a way to organize my thoughts and share them with the world. And it forces me to be very coherent and very clear about things that I think about often. And so when you're talking, this is a point of contention for you and me, external sources saying you're doing a good job and pat on the back are not helpful for me. in any way, because if that were the case, my cheesy, like, you can do it, you're gonna do great, but like I would just put those posts out, and I would be like every single LinkedIn influencer out there who posts motivational drivel, is what I call it, right? Yeah. And I can do that. I know how to write motivational drivel. I can write 20 pieces of motivational drivel, but and I'm going to get a lot of feedback from that, right? Like really positive feedback from LinkedIn. But what keeps me going is sharing complicated ideas put simply, regardless of whether they get, interaction or not. One of the posts I was most proud of recently that didn't get much interaction, considering how good the post was. And I had a lot of my longtime followers say, John, this is the best thing you've ever put out. And I said, I agree. I wrote them in the comments. I brought up this idea of emotional privilege, where we look at somebody like Darren, right, and we see, he's a white guy, and he comes from privilege, and we see him as that, right? But what we don't actually see is somebody's internal world and the way that they were brought up in familial relations, in a loving, caring environment. That's invisible to us, but that still ties into this idea of privilege, right? If you come from, let's say, a poorer family, but you were surrounded by love, from grandmothers and cousins and uncles and parents, right? And you're going to have an advantage over somebody who may have come from a wealthy family with parents who were neglectful or worked too much or were alcoholics or some sort of emotional abuse, right? We don't think about that. So this was an actual original idea of mine that I put out there. And people don't respond to it. But I had to be okay with that. I had to be like, this is just really good. I'm glad I got this really good piece of content out there. So that it brings the real people who follow me, closer in. It's a long-winded answer to what you're saying, Darren, but I think it's really important that the internal motivation is understood. Right, there's something about powerlifting for you that keeps you going. There's something about I forgot what you said, abs and ass on Instagram that keeps Gen Z going, right? That dopamine hit, that need for approval from others is the thing that keeps you going. Just be honest about that.
And you actually described everything there in the last couple of sentences about how it all wraps up, and it goes back to the core origins of why you do something. So if the motives, like you're doing, are for good, like what you believe in your mind is that this is good, similar to what I'm doing my podcast, I believe that this is going to help someone, and therefore I'm happy to get up early, man, do it late, get it all done, and just work on it. However, when the origins of something are not how best to put it, with good interests or with good intent, you lead to the other aspects of the internet, which is anxiety, which is depression, looking at your friends, the fear of missing out, because again, it's based off the wrong things, the wrong origins. And I think that's a big issue with the Gen Z kind of approach, is that we're all looking at the superficial lifestyle. We think that we can get to it. We're looking for the shortcut. We're looking for the next booty workout, the new 15-minute crash course. And as a result, we don't want to commit to the process, which is, it's difficult, man. There's some days where just like things just don't work, and we just see what's on the front end, which is...
Well, I see the same thing in human relationships with young people as well. I talk to a lot of young people on LinkedIn, and sometimes we have very, very deep conversations. Like, I would include this as one. This is not, we're talking about substantive things here. And the same way that they approach activities, they also approach relationships. They're disposable. They're good for a little while, and then you throw them away. And it always shocks me, because I'm a relationship guy. I like to stay in touch with people over time, see how they're doing, check in, find out what's going on, right? And the Gen Z generation just is not there. They just don't, that is not necessarily a value that they have, which is the importance of deep connections with others, right? There's a sort of superficiality for a lot of them, or short-termism with the way that they see people. People tend to be disposable in their life. And that's interesting to me as well. And always takes me for a surprise. It's one of the major learnings I've had about Gen Z over the last year and a half, is just to be kind of expect the short-termism to happen.
Mm-hmm. I think it's as well to do with the engagement in terms of like how we interact with one another. So like it'll be voice note, it'll be IM, but it's short messages versus,
That's right.
I suppose back when you were younger, like you'd schedule a time on a phone, you'd ring on a landline,
That's right.
and then you'd pay, your parents would give out to you that you're costing the house too much, But
Yes.
that's what happened. My brother, who's a couple of years older than me, so it's interesting to see that kind of concept evolve over time. But I think another quite interesting area that I want to discuss was around well, the trade-off between status and privilege versus
Mhm.
following a passion and enjoyment. So
Mhm.
again,
It's a good question.
take me as a perfect
Mhm.
example. So went into consulting out of college. Now consulting is great. Like there's great people there. It's very good if you do enjoy it. But I just didn't particularly enjoy it, and that's just the way it was. But I thought I would enjoy it. I like the title. I like the money. It was fantastic. Now again, I thought that I'm doing charity work now. I can't say that I'm still working in banking. However, I'm doing something that I'm really interested in. I love startups.
Yeah.
I love scaling startups. I think it's awesome. I think people are great and things like this. So
Yeah.
that's what I've moved myself into towards, and I'm just following what I think is where my interests lie. How do
Mhm.
you think about this, and how do you
I
think we
love
should
this
approach this?
question. Yeah, I love this question. And I talk about it all the time on LinkedIn, and I get basically pilloried across the internet for my thoughts on this. A job is something that you do to make money. A job is not something that you do to find meaning in your life or an identity. You can be good at it. You can, people can say job well done. You can make a lot of money doing it. And it's not something necessarily that's going to fulfill you. And I think you're the perfect example of this. You have your hobbies outside of your job that feel fulfilling. And same here, right? We haven't even talked about the fact that my job is actually VP of research at New York City Tourism Board, right? That's what I do for a living. That's what pays my bills for the most part. Do I like my job? I like it a lot. I like the work that I'm doing. I like the people I'm working with. It's interesting, it's fun, it's complicated. Do I consider that a part of my identity? Not at all. I considered it a way for me to earn money and to be somewhat satisfied with earning money through a job, right? Young people need to consider that life and career are not necessarily the same thing, and that trying to find happiness and joy and satisfaction in the work that you do can ultimately lead to a lot of frustration. And that's why it's so important to pursue things outside of that, right? I'm the perfect example. Like this whole hustle culture, find yourself, blah blah stuff you guys do. I wasn't involved in that in the first 5 years after my, after I graduated from college. I took a job and it was very easy. Nothing was hard. I wasn't using my brain. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't like thinking if I'm fulfilled, blah blah blah. But I was pursuing all of these other things. I ran a marathon. Believe it or not, you looking at me now, you're like, how the hell did this guy do that? But I did. I was like your age, 25. I ran a marathon. I sang in choirs. I went on trips to Europe. I met my wife, and all of these things happened, because I was living my life rather than living to work. Work was a way for me to get money. I went to tons of concerts. Oh my God, so many great bands. I'm just having nostalgia for my early 20s. Maybe that's why I talked to so many of you guys, Darren. It was such a fun time in my life. But anyways, enough about me and my nostalgia. The point here is that you can find work that you like, just don't make it your life. Right. And it's a very, very important lesson that I don't think young people really, really understand now. They want to find the enjoyment. And like you said, it has to be quick satisfaction or they're going to quit. Right. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, it doesn't work like that, but okay. Or they're still searching and they're feeling that they're unsatisfied. It's because working, and I think you actually brought this point out there, and working for somebody isn't going to be fully satisfying, I don't think, for anybody, because you're still working for someone. You're not in control of what you do 100%. So finding those other endeavors where you feel like you do have control is going to be really, really important to being satisfied with life and to find meaning.
Absolutely. Like that's completely accurate from the very, very beginning. Like if every single day I always consider that if I was to quit my job and go full-time podcasting, would it be potential that I could do it because of the fact that I get so much enjoyment from it. Like I love these conversations. I'm, headphones in, I'm immersed in it. I leave and I'm exhausted and I'm just so happy and I'm so satisfied when things get uploaded and it's helping people. And I think that's awesome. Now I love my job and make a good bit of cash and it's great. But again, ultimately, there's something that triggers in my brain when I do something for myself. And actually, when I did my first internship, it was in State Street. It's an investment bank in London. A contractor said to me, I had a company at the side, which was a clothing company, which absolutely went tits up, nearly got sued for like 30K. But anyway, that's a story for another day. But basically, he said to me, I'll never forget this. He was like, the 50 quid you make from that company will mean so much more to you than any money you make in this company. And I remember exactly when the first order came in on Shopify, and it just felt so much more. And I don't know what it is. It just triggered. And I remember I woke up in the morning to it. I know this seems like fucking as typical like story, but yeah, like it's interesting. And I always thought about that since. And the idea isn't to walk away and run away from my job. However, there is definitely capacity in a couple of years that I have all this cash built up. I give a bit of more time into what it is I want to do personally, because I might have, I don't know, family, kid, whatever. Professionally, is there something that I could essentially cultivate and create and monetize and have that would be satisfying enough to live?
Yep. And you don't, and here's the thing for students or young professionals listening to this, it doesn't necessarily have to be something for money, right? Darren's not making money off of these podcasts yet. He would like
100% not.
I'm not really monetizing my time on LinkedIn. I may be the only quote unquote influencer who doesn't have a program so that you can be like me, right? I'm not monetizing it. I'm just using it because I really, really enjoy sharing. It's like every day I get to unwrap a gift. That's the way I think about my LinkedIn post, right? I put it out. I'm like, oh, I get to unwrap a gift by sharing my thoughts with the world and see how they respond. It's a beautiful thing for me, right? That feeling and that experience of that. Am I making money on it? No. But to your point, I did have my first sponsored post, and I have never been so proud of money that I earned in my life. To your point, right? I put out a sponsored post, and they paid me a lot of money for it, and I was like, I'm so excited by this money that I'm earning for doing the thing that I love, and it's obviously barely a fraction of what I make at my full-time job, but that money that came in for that was so satisfying because it was validation for the work that I'm doing on LinkedIn and the hard work that I'm putting into this and the difference that I'm making. So yeah, backing up your point here, I get it. And I think people need to keep that in mind, that work is not necessarily paid. Career is paid. It's one of the mottos that I live by and go by.
And that's kind of part of like the creator economy at the moment. If you're creating stuff like you have been on LinkedIn for so long, you're not essentially monetizing it and making it like essentially like an income stream at the moment, but it's doing something that you enjoy, which again someday can be monetized. Like I actually said to my girlfriend the other day, I said that I was like, the thing about me and podcasting is that I actually don't need to be making money off it. It would be awesome if, I don't know, a Cash App were paying me like a load of cash to advertise. That would be fantastic. Not gonna lie, but it's nice because I don't need it. Whereas when you're younger, when you're younger and you're in college and you're starting a side project, it's like, fuck, I need to make money off this. Otherwise, I am wasting my time. I could be working a part-time job in a pizza place and just making cash to pay my tuition or whatever. Whereas now I'm in a nice kind of transitionary period, which is good because it's focused on what do I enjoy and going down that route.
Yep.
And if you get paid, you get paid,
Looking at content creation as a monetization effort is just not the way to do it. Yeah. Because you're losing the core of why people want to follow you, right? If I went into LinkedIn thinking, how can I make money with this? My message, my authenticity, the things that I'm preaching, the things that I'm saying, sharing my philosophy with the world through my minimalist thoughts would get skewed because I'd be like, oh, is this the thing that's going to lead to making money, right? So there's no problem with wanting to make money off of content creation, or but you have to establish that this is something that you enjoy and want to do for free first. Otherwise, like we said, you just won't be motivated to continue to do it.
And that alignment. I was chatting to my mate recently, actually, his girlfriend has actually started to monetize her Instagram. She is like a background in fashion. She has always loved fashion, and now is going to do a fashion degree. And on the side has just happened to monetize it because she's been so interested in it. And we were just discussing how at the core of everything that she was doing, she was just interested in it. It's all been real. It's all been authentic. Now, contrast that to people who you can clearly visibly see are trying to sell the next course, or trying to just build a following so that they can just sell you something that they don't believe in. And a perfect example is, I won't name names, but people selling like literal anxiety courses on Instagram, and we just know there's no alignment there to begin with. And that's what takes a bit of time to figure out, I think, especially at the beginning of a side project.
Yeah, it's frustrating that, we're getting a little bit off topic here, but to me, it's frustrating that I may literally be the only person on LinkedIn who's just not pushing towards something. And that's fine. I have no problem with people who are hustling and making a living on this, and they're open with it. Like, good for them. But I think it's frustrating that people aren't on LinkedIn the same way that they are on Instagram for the joy of being on LinkedIn, sharing thoughts. That it always has to lead to some sort of monetization or business aspect. LinkedIn would be a much better place if people were there to just share how they feel about the world and their place in it. And it's something that I preach, and it's not something that anybody wants to do. It's a very interesting phenomenon. People really fight against that. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think, the enjoyment of something is what's going to keep you going. The motivation. I love the example you gave of your fashion friend, that she's in this world and she likes to show visually who she is through the fashion that she wears. And then that just naturally dovetails into making money. That's exactly the right approach, right? It's like, you have this passion, you have this thing you love, you have this thing you've devoted yourself to, and then the money comes after.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. It's like just natural. And it's funny you said about LinkedIn, because it's like everyone at the core may have an ulterior motive going on. And that's just,
I hate that. I hate that.
Yeah.
I wish people didn't. I wish they were just transparent and be like, I'm just here to share stuff.
Yeah.
And then I don't need to make a LinkedIn course telling you how I got to 30,000 followers, right? I put a joke post out the other day because so many people are like, I just reached 100,000 followers and here's my course to show you how to do it. And I put a joke post out and I was like, I grew from 15,000 followers to 135,000 followers and here's how I did it. And I listed like 5 really obvious things. It's like, here you go follow it, but no one can follow it because it was, it's something that I created for myself. Like, and it's based on my wisdom and the way that I approach the world. And you can't follow in that direction. Mm-hmm. It's not something you can do. There's no course for it. It's something, I followed my own course. Mm-hmm. And teaching people to do it would be wrong, right?
Yeah.
In my mind. So it's all interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, it's building a muscle and improving on that skill, and doesn't mm-hmm. matter what you're doing. The last thing I want to chat about is all around career advancements and kind of success, quote unquote, mm-hmm. like being successful. Now, mm-hmm. Say what you want. It could be egotistical, kind of driven, or it could be my own ego, or it could be me wanting to satisfy something that's more deeper. But my biggest fear is kind of being like ordinary, being maybe middle of the pack overall over a longer period. It's just something, I don't know, it was just maybe a competitive aspect of me that I mm-hmm. always kind of fear about, like that maybe things will fizzle out and I'll end up just being a middle manager and mm-hmm. never really kind of getting to my full potential versus mm-hmm. becoming like a CEO. It's more like that aspect.
Yeah.
So mm-hmm. to go back to the root first, how do you define success in career?
I love this question.
It's not always based on seniority, pay grade and whatnot. And there's obviously different factors, but how do you approach something like this and think about it?
It's a great question. And I write about it a lot. To me, career success is finding the thing that fits into your life, right? Now this is actually maybe an original post that I'll put out because I just came up with this idea as we're talking about it. But a career needs to fit like a shoe, right? And a shoe is only one part of the clothing that you put on, right? You got pants, you got a shirt, you got to keep warm, and the career is a shoe, right? It fits into your life, and you have to figure out, like a successful person is figuring out how to fit the shoe to the foot in the best possible way, right? So if you want to be a CEO, that means you're going to devote all of your time to your career, and that means you're not going to bodybuild and you're not going to podcast, right? You're going to have to learn how to politics. So a lot of your time is going to be spent being Machiavellian, right? I don't know if everybody here knows the term, but you're going to have to embrace the worst that humanity has to offer, right? This is the reality of becoming a CEO. You got to step on some people because not too many people get to be CEO. And you don't get to be CEO through hard work necessarily. You get to be CEO because you're calculating, you're cunning, and you're able to cut people down. Now, that's fine. Notice how there's no judgment from me on that. It's just reality. That's what a CEO is. But in order to do that, you can forget who you are ethically, right? And then you can forget other parts of your life. You may not be a family person because you want to be CEO, but getting to that level and making that money and having that kind of power at a company is core to you. You're the shoe that fits you at that time, right? That's the person who does that. If you meet corporate executives, I have a lot of respect for them because they're masters at this political maneuvering and gaming and strategizing. How do I step on this person to get up here, right? That takes a lot of effort and skill. Not necessarily what you want to hear, Darren, but this is what it takes to succeed, right? And it's not through hard work, and it's not through being the best at what you do. It's but you can pursue, if the shoe fits there, you can do that too. If you want to be the master, coder, and you want to make the most elegant code, and that's what's going to make the shoe fit the best, then go ahead and do that. Success is going after the thing that helps you fit into your life, not necessarily the thing that society says you should do, because there's always a trade-off. I think that's the point that I'm trying to make here.
Yeah, I completely agree, because you need to essentially drop something to make something, and you're always in that that kind of roundabout kind of pressure, as in really trying to like satisfy one need, but also trying to drop something else so that you can fit into your lifestyle. And I think that's always a trade-off, in the longer term. But really moving
young people hate this idea of politics, though. It makes them feel really dirty. Like it's just reality. It's just how it is. This is what it is. It's corporate America. It's competitive. You don't do it, you're going to get forgotten. You're going to get fired. So it's a very, very uncomfortable thing for young people, because they're like, no, that's not how the world works. I'm like, okay, you're not going to listen to me, but it is.
100%. What other aspects do you think are most like kind of important to getting into that state? As in, is it like networking so that you're at a state where you're better than better than everyone else because you're more connected, within the company, and you have essentially a broader reach. People know you. Is this the reality?
That is the reality. And networking, we didn't talk about that. We could do a whole hour podcast on that. That stupid phrase, your network is your net worth, is so true. Mm-hmm. Young people need to really build out their networks. And I don't think any of them, I'm literally talking about 100% of them, have no idea what it means to build a network. And how to maintain it and cultivate it, which is why, again, a lot of my posts for young people are about how to do networking right, which is just really just building relationships. Like you and I are networking, even though I'm on a podcast. And like, wow, Darren, we established a relationship right now because I'm on your podcast and I have a lot of respect for you and you're clearly thoughtful. And we had, a really great conversation. We just networked. We're now contacts, right? So networking is huge for young people, but it's not self-serving. It's a way to say, what does this person need, the other person, and how can I give them as much as what they need, so that eventually, if I need something, I can go to them and say, look, this is a need of mine. Is there something you can help with, right? Whatever that thing is. Never ever take first. Yeah. Rule number one for university and early career.
I completely think that all of that is so correct as well. Like no one's thinking about it. I think even the term is just not really widely accepted. That's generally my honest opinion. People don't really buy into it. But I actually just had a post on that today about, essentially it was a quote saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And my approach is that this is often seen as negative or as a form of nepotism, but actually in reality, this is so difficult to do, to manage, to cultivate, to essentially always keep close connections. But I would say that you need the skill, you need the experience, but your network will glue it all together. That's a glue that binds you together. And that's my honest opinion, trying to literally get as broad a reach, but not as just broad, as also deep, connecting, and then getting to a state whereby you're friendly and you can work together. And I think a main thing as well for me was about like not like trying to get something off someone, you know. Obviously, you know,
That's
I
right.
reached out to you and I was like, "Do you want to be on my podcast?" But like, I don't really like want anything from you, you know, and I kind of want
That's
that to be
right.
like evident, you know. And then it's fine. And funnily enough, you actually might know this is actually kind of unrelated but related at the same time. You may have heard of a group, electronic group from New York back in the '90s called Mood to Swing, by any
I don't
chance?
know them.
Basically, you'd
No,
actually
I'm a
know.
huge music fan. I don't know Mood to Swing. Wow.
You might know
Okay.
the tune "Alternate Free."
Okay.
It's a really typical like '90s tune, but basically he's a DJ from like the '90s. From the '90s, I met him on a plane, okay, in Croatia. This guy's 6'5". He was like, "Hey mate, can you sit outside?" I was like, "Yeah, cool." We just started talking, just getting on really well, and now as a result, we've ended up being really good mates. I've seen him play in London. I've seen him play in Ibiza, and became really kind of close. And I think what happened was that I never actually wanted anything from him. He never needed anything from me, and now we're just kind of like close kind of contacts and whatnot. But I think
Hmm.
the principle there and the learning lesson here is that
That's right.
I never really wanted him to come and give me a job at Goldman Sachs or to get me into this
That's right.
firm or do something like that. You know, it started off by me just being like, "Hey, I like your music. Let's just like converse."
Yeah, and then you create a strengthened relationship based on just being there for each other and connecting with humans, and that's all networking is. So I work in the travel and tourism industry, and I talk about this a lot with people I network with. The industry is notoriously known for networking and just getting to know people for who they are, and people go into the industry for that. It's called hospitality for a reason. There's a welcoming and warm vibe from everybody you meet, and it's a hugging industry, right? Like you have to get used to that. Everybody hugs each other. They don't even know you, they're going to give you a hug, right? It fits well with who I am, right? I present myself in the same warm, or hopefully present myself in the same warm, friendly, and inviting way, and show my true self, right?
Mhm.
And when you do that, then when you don't approach it from I need something and I'm going to be cold and I'm going to have a professional mask on, which all students think that they need, you're not going to create those authentic relationships. People are going to see through it. They're going to feel a little weird and icky, and you're not going to get what you want. So you really need to just be open. I think that's the word here, and just present yourself as you are to the world, and not feel like there's this need to be a professional, because I really, really admire the industry I'm in for that reason.
Yeah, completely agree. John, I'd like to say a massive thank you. I really appreciate your time. This has been awesome. So much fun. I'd love to sit down again for another 2-3 hours, but I unfortunately have to go after this. But I really appreciate your time, and I'd like to say a massive thank you.
Yeah, this was great, Darren. Thanks so much for having me.